The glasses hadn't even stopped clinking when I felt the floor shift beneath me. Marcus stood tall, smug, holding court like he always tried to do. That voice of his, too loud for the setting, too performative, cut across the rooftop buzz. "Let's toast," he said, lifting his drink high, to the man of the hour, who somehow didn't know his wife's been consulting me for months. A few people laughed, the kind of laugh that comes before the brain catches up to the meaning. Then the silence, like someone pulled a plug on the evening. I felt it before I saw it. My husband stiffened a few feet away. He didn't say a word, just calmly set his glass down, walked to the bar, and tapped the counter with 2 knuckles, clear, crisp, deliberate. "Marcus," he said, voice level. "Thanks for confirming everything I needed. And Sasha, hope you kept the backup copies." My name, ice cold, unblinking. Then he turned and walked out. Just like that. No scene, no shouting. Just a silence so deep, I could hear someone's bracelet rattle as they shifted in their seat. If you're still watching and any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe. Most people just listen in silence, but that one click tells the team these stories matter. I stood there, mouth open, half a glass of red in my hand, unable to breathe. Marcus looked around, confused now that the punchline had collapsed. My friends blinked, no one moved. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The whole thing was meant to be funny. Dark humor, a bit of flirtation, sure, but not this. Not a man walking out on his own birthday without raising his voice. I chased after him. Down the rooftop stairs, heels catching on concrete. But by the time I hit the lobby, the front door was swinging shut. A cab peeled away into traffic. No hesitation. No pause to look back. His phone was still on the rooftop table. I held it for a second, then checked it. No passcode. That was the first real shiver. He always had it locked. Always. There were no recent texts, no notes, just one folder in the Files app. Sasha, contingency. Inside it, a copy of our prenup, a screenshot of Marcus's text to me, a spreadsheet labeled Asset Protection, Phase 1. I stared at the screen, the blood draining from my face. I didn't even know he had this side to him. That stillness, that level of planning. When I came back up, the party was dead. People avoided my eyes. Someone had shut the music off. Marcus was on his second whiskey and had the nerve to laugh. "Guess he can't take a joke," he muttered. But no one laughed this time. I sat down in the empty seat my husband had left behind. And for the first time in years, I had no idea what he was going to do next, only that he was already doing it, and I was too late to stop it. By 6 a.m., the room was still dim with leftover city haze, the kind that made everything feel like a bad dream until you blinked twice. But it wasn't a dream. The glass he'd tapped at the bar still sat half full on the counter. His phone was where I'd left it, screen black, SIM tray open, card snapped in half beside it. He was gone. Not the storming out kind of gone. The calculated kind, the quiet exit that meant he'd planned this long before Marcus raised his glass. His closet was too clean, the shoes he wore to meetings. Gone. The old duffel he used for work trips. Gone. The brown leather folder he always kept in the bottom drawer, the one I used to tease him about like it held nuclear codes. Empty shelf now. I opened the drawer next to the nightstand, hoping, that he left a note? A scrap of emotion I could use to pull him back? Nothing. Just the faint scent of cedar and a missing pen. Even the charger was gone. Every detail deliberate. I checked our joint banking app. Session expired. I tried again. User not found. I felt my stomach fold inward. I opened the other app, the brokerage account we used to argue about. It still had my name listed, but every holding now had a small lock icon next to it. Restricted access. I tapped through the tabs, hands shaking. The trust fund, the property line, the offshore savings we built up after his consultancy sale. Every single one now had his name and a new legal entity attached, one I didn't recognize. Later that morning, his lawyer emailed me, not even mine, his. Cold subject line, notice of trust restructure, immediate execution, per section, 5.3. Inside, it was all jargon. Jurisdictional terms, fiduciary shifts, power of attorney revocations. But the line that hit hardest was buried in a paragraph of legalese. Beneficiary rights under Sasha Marinelli dissolved effective upon reputational breach, dated timestamp 9:42 p.m. rooftop. That was the exact moment Marcus made his toast. He hadn't run. He'd waited. Somewhere along the way, while I was scrolling Marcus's stories or picking out bar venues or laughing off my husband's late nights, he was building a parachute, one with names I never heard of. Shell companies, foreign addresses, offshore counsel. He'd built an entire exit strategy around a scenario I didn't even think he had the pride to imagine. He hadn't asked questions, hadn't argued, hadn't confronted me. He just watched. I kept refreshing our accounts, but the app started asking for a two-factor code, one that only existed on a number he'd taken with him, some prepaid burner probably, or tied to a digital ID I wouldn't even know how to trace. I called our accountant. She picked up, voice tight. "I've been instructed not to speak with you, Sasha." Click. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was loud, like being locked in a room where every object reminded you of someone who used to love you, and now was erasing you piece by piece with surgical precision. I didn't know where he went. But the scariest part wasn't the disappearance. It was that everything he left behind said this wasn't spontaneous. This was a man who'd done the math, who'd seen the pattern, who'd given me 100 quiet opportunities to choose differently, and kept the receipt for each one. I had turned the ignition. He had built the fuel. It started as damage control. At brunch the next day, I made a joke about it. Told my friend Rachel it was just Marcus being Marcus. He always pushed too far when he drank. I laughed it off like it was some awkward inside joke that backfired. "You know how guys are," I said, swirling the straw in my mimosa. "Boys and their egos." Rachel smiled, but her eyes didn't. "Sure," she said. "But your husband didn't come back." That's when I felt it, that invisible shift. The difference between people laughing with you and people looking through you. I didn't panic, though. Not yet. I crafted a version of the story I could live with. Something light, a bit of public teasing, a misunderstanding, nothing malicious. "He'll cool off," I said. "He always does." But then the video surfaced. Not on Instagram or anywhere public. No, someone at the party sent it to a private group chat. A guy from his firm, I think. And from there, it leaked sideways. Within days, people were forwarding it like it was entertainment. In the clip, you could hear Marcus's exact words, slurred and smug. "Let's toast the guy who didn't know his wife's been consulting me for months." The laughter, my smirk, my glance away from my husband as he stood, utterly still. Then his voice, clearer than I remembered. "Thanks for confirming everything I needed." The way he walked out with the whole room watching, and the way no one, not even me, called after him. The clip cut off right there, but that was enough. Too much, actually. By midweek, I started noticing odd silences. Emails from work that didn't include me, a rescheduled meeting I wasn't invited back to. One of my biggest clients sent a vague message about reviewing representation, then nothing. I called my husband's assistant, former assistant now that he was missing. She didn't answer. I tried his friend Mike. "Haven't heard from him," he said quickly, then hung up. People were pulling away, quietly, but deliberately. Then the press inquiry started. Someone from a business podcast messaged me on LinkedIn. "Would you be willing to comment on the events at the rooftop party? We've had multiple tips that the exit of Mr. Marinelli was premeditated." Premeditated. That word hit like a slap, like someone had opened the door to a room I hadn't wanted to admit existed. I filed a missing persons report, sat there in the police station explaining it all. My husband walked out of a party and never came back. No calls, no trace, passport inactive, credit cards dormant. The officer asked, "Was he suicidal?" "No," I said quickly. "Not at all." He nodded, flipped the paper over, and didn't ask any more questions. That was the moment the smirk vanished from my face. It had been 5 days. 5 days since he disappeared. No trace, no heat signature, no social media pings, not even a burner email. My phone rang. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't hear his voice. Not now. Not while the world was reshaping itself around a moment I had treated like a casual jab. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't threatened. He had simply left. And in doing so, he let everyone else write the story. And they were writing fast. That's when I realized I had no version of events that would save me. No phrasing, no charm, no edit button. Because this wasn't just about a moment at a party. It was about what came after, or what didn't. And now everyone was watching what I'd do next, wondering what kind of woman drives a man to vanish without a word. I sat across from the banker, tapping my nails against the edge of the leather folder she'd placed between us. She looked apologetic, but firm. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Marinelli. You're no longer authorized on this account." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She rotated the screen toward me. My name was grayed out. Revoked. It was restructured last week under a private fiduciary LLC. You'll have to direct inquiries through legal counsel. I stood too fast. My chair scraped the marble. There must be a mistake. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't. I drove straight to our real estate attorney's office, the one we'd used for years. He hadn't returned my calls all week. This time, I walked in and waited until someone noticed me. When he finally emerged, he looked older, like he'd been bracing for this. "I need to know who owns the house," I said, voice low but shaking. "The title should still be in both our names." He glanced at the assistant, then closed the door. "Sasha," he said gently. "It's not." He pulled up a file on his screen. It was transferred last month into a Delaware LLC. Privacy protected, but the filing address matches one of your husband's business entities. I swallowed. "Without my signature." He turned the monitor. "You signed quitclaim authority 3 years ago when you refinanced. The clause gave him full discretion to transfer without co-consent, as long as the mortgage obligation was cleared, which it was." The room tilted a little. I gripped the arm of the chair. I left there in a daze, stopped in the car, opened my phone, and called Elliot, my divorce attorney, back when we almost split 2 years ago. He agreed to meet that afternoon. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. He was polite, professional, until I handed him the copy of our prenup. He flipped through page after page, marked notes, circled phrases, then his brow furrowed. He went back to one section twice, read it silently, then he looked up at me. "Did you see this before you signed?" I leaned forward. "See what?" He read aloud. "In the event of public defamation, slander, or reputational harm caused by spouse A toward spouse B, deliberately or indirectly, spouse A shall forfeit all claims to jointly held assets, property, and financial instruments, effective immediately upon proof of breach." I stared at him. He tapped the corner of the clause. This was added as an amendment, tied to a weekend date, not part of the original draft. "When?" He flipped the final page toward me. A sticky note was scanned into the PDF. My husband's handwriting. This version signed while Sasha was in Cabo with Marcus. She requested no interruptions that weekend. My jaw went slack. I remembered that trip. I'd been annoyed he kept calling. I told him to handle whatever needed handling and leave me out of it. He had. My attorney looked at me, cautious now. "This is enforceable, especially with video evidence of what happened on the rooftop. It would meet the burden of proof under defamation." "But it was a joke," I whispered. "We were playing around." "Not according to how it landed, and not with how fast he moved. Sasha, this isn't a reaction. This was built." I sat back in the chair. All the air seemed gone from the room. I didn't just lose the narrative. I'd lost the house, the accounts, the security I thought was mine by default. He hadn't needed revenge. He'd needed leverage, and I delivered it to him with a smirk and a stemmed glass of wine in my hand. He wasn't playing chess. He was finishing the last move of a game I didn't even realize we were playing. I called Liam first, his best man. He always liked me, or at least he used to. We'd shared a toast at the wedding, hugged after the rehearsal dinner, even exchanged jokes in group chats that didn't include my husband. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Nothing dramatic, just, "Hey, can we talk? I know you know something." I never heard back. Next, I messaged his sister Ava a simple line, "I hope you're doing okay. Can we speak?" The message bounced, not delivered. I tried again from a different platform. Still nothing. Then I saw it. She'd blocked me, quietly, without warning, not even a passive-aggressive post to signal the why. Then I saw the press release. It was from his godfather's firm, a quiet, prestigious wealth management office known for discretion. The statement read, "In support of mental clarity and strategic alignment, we affirm the importance of physical and emotional distance during periods of reputational turbulence. We stand by our founding partners as they prioritize peace, purpose, and privacy." No names, but everyone who knew us knew what it meant. The silence wasn't a coincidence, it was coordinated. His world was folding in on itself, brick by brick, sealing me out. These weren't strangers. They were people I'd laughed with, vacationed with, given Christmas gifts to. People who once texted me directly with plans, now acting like I'd never existed. I got dressed for the gala in defiance. It was an annual charity event he used to host. I'd helped build it, handled guest lists, worked donor tables, even gave a speech once. It felt like mine too, in a way. I wore a slate gray dress, nothing flashy, pulled my hair back, chose the earrings his mother once complimented. I arrived early, slid past check-in using last year's QR code. No one stopped me, but no one greeted me either. Old friends turned their shoulders. One woman I'd shared a spa weekend with looked right through me. Two of the board members glanced over, then deliberately looked away. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It was practiced. I hovered near the back bar, trying to look purposeful. Finally, a man approached, maybe mid-50s, polished, new face. He looked at me kindly, but with a hint of something harder underneath. "Excuse me," he said, tilting his head. "Are you lost?" I blinked. "No, I helped organize this for years." He smiled politely. "But you're not on this year's list." "I didn't need to RSVP," I said, heart starting to race. He cut me off. "Everyone needs to RSVP." A pause, then the question, "Why are you here?" That did it. The words hit something soft and raw I hadn't known was still exposed. I left without finishing the drink in my hand, sat in my car in the garage for 10 full minutes, staring at the steering wheel. It wasn't about being locked out of the account or losing the house or watching my social media engagement tank. It was the quiet erasure, the empty inboxes, the missed calls that would never return. He hadn't just left. He'd taken the scaffolding with him, the community, the loyalty, the protection. And the worst part, they weren't siding with him out of fear. They were choosing him because he had always carried himself with restraint, with clarity, with substance. They believed him because he didn't need to say a word. And now, even my name felt like it belonged to someone no one remembered. It was a Tuesday afternoon, rainy and dull, when the headline stopped me cold, "The Architect Behind Billionaire Privacy." I was halfway through a client call, email tabs open, pretending to listen while scrolling headlines for a distraction. But this wasn't noise. This was something else entirely. Forbes, long form, cover image, a wide shot of a sunlit balcony in Valencia. Someone standing there, turned away, hands resting lightly on the iron rail, face blurred, identity undisclosed. I shouldn't have felt anything. It had been nearly 2 years. But something in the posture, relaxed yet precise, like every bone in his body was in quiet alignment, made my stomach tighten. I clicked. The article didn't give a name, just referred to him as C, the reclusive strategist behind a network of digital privacy vaults and legal constructs used by celebrities, political families, and newly minted billionaires looking to disappear from public record. The firm's real name wasn't listed, just hints. A parent company folded into a philanthropic foundation, a trust, international partners, all shielded by dense corporate fog. Halfway through the article, my eyes locked on a single photo, grainy, taken from distance, the same balcony, same man. Zoom in, there, left wrist, a faint scar just above the bone, thin and pale from a bike accident he'd had in Maine years ago. I remembered cleaning it, pressing a cool cloth to it while he muttered about cheap brake lines. I remembered the shape of his shoulders when he turned away from conflict. And this image, he was turning again. Only this time, not from me, from everything. The article included a quote attributed to him, paraphrased by the journalist. "Some people don't need to be seen to reshape the world. They just need space and silence." I reread it 4 times. My hands had gone cold. The man I mocked in front of a crowd, the man I thought would crumble, or at least smolder quietly in some second-rate condo. He hadn't vanished. He'd ascended. He was now the architect of disappearance itself, and not just for himself, for others. High-profile clients were mentioned but never named. A pattern emerged. Anyone needing to sever ties, bury traces, protect generational wealth from scandal, they came to him. A detail near the end of the piece shook me more than the photo. The author wrote, "Several sources confirmed that C began building his network years before going fully dark. One contact described him as a man who never forgets the exit door in every room he walks into." That line gutted me because I used to joke about how he'd always sit near exits at restaurants, how he never liked booths, how he kept backup copies of everything. I used to call it quirky, paranoid, exhausting, but now I understood it had never been about control. It was about precision, about knowing when to walk away and when to disappear so cleanly that silence became a signature. I closed the article. I didn't sleep that night. My dreams were colorless and jagged. Every time I blinked, I saw that balcony, the tilt of his shoulders, the scar. He hadn't just moved on, he'd built something I couldn't even pronounce, a new ecosystem, a global network of silence, control, and dignity, all in the absence of my voice. And I knew, deep down, that the only reason I even glimpsed it at all was because he allowed it. A single leak, a single trace, just enough for me to understand the scale of what I'd lost. He hadn't deleted me, he'd outgrown me, and worse, he'd built the blueprint for others to do the same. The sun was already low when I stepped off the train in Valencia. The sky burned orange at the edges, the kind of color that makes everything feel like it's holding its breath. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. I barely told myself. Just bought the ticket, packed the same coat I wore to his mother's funeral, and boarded the flight. I didn't expect to find him. And yet, I did. He was seated alone at a cafe near the port, same corner table he used to favor when we traveled. A white porcelain cup in front of him, untouched, eyes on the sea, not the screen, not a book, just watching the tide roll in with that maddening stillness he always carried. Like he was never in a rush to prove he existed. I stood there for a second, afraid to speak, afraid to breathe. When he finally looked up, the air shifted. No surprise, no anger, no softening, just a flat, unreadable gaze, like I was a painting he couldn't decide whether to remove or let fade. I walked slowly to the table, pulled out the chair opposite him, sat down. His hands stayed where they were, fingers steepled lightly as if in prayer. No twitch, no flicker of recognition in his body, just presence, measured and detached. "I didn't mean to humiliate you," I said. The words tasted cheap, like something rehearsed too many times in an empty hotel mirror. He nodded once, then answered without raising his voice. "No, you meant to be clever." He let the sentence sit. "And now you see the cost." My eyes welled despite myself. I tried to smile. It cracked before it formed. "I lost everything," I whispered. He tilted his head just slightly. "You lost access. There's a difference." I reached across the table, my hand hovered, then settled, palm up, waiting. The gesture was instinct, not strategy. Desperate, human, hoping something in him might still reach back, even if just for a second he didn't move. Not out of cruelty, not from malice, just distance, like the gap between us had grown from inches to miles. The cafe buzzed with low conversation, plates clinking, sea wind teasing the awnings, but at our table, it was still. The kind of still that makes you realize silence isn't absence, it's judgment at rest. "You don't miss me at all?" I asked quietly. His eyes flicked toward me, then away. "I miss the man I was when I thought you saw me." I swallowed hard. "I see you now." "No," he said. "You see what you lost." I looked down at the table. The grain of the wood, the faint coffee ring near his elbow, the edge of a receipt sticking from under the saucer. All tiny, meaningless things, and yet somehow heavier than my heart in that moment. "You don't live in my world anymore," he said, "and I have no reason to return to yours." He stood slowly, pulled a 10-euro note from his coat pocket, placed it neatly under the cup. No drama, no final statement, just quiet precision. Then he walked away. No backward glance, no hesitation. The chair across from me rocked gently in the breeze. A waiter passed without stopping, and I sat there, hands still extended, like a monument to a woman who learned too late what it means to reach for something already gone. He chose a terrace above the marina, public enough for civility, distant enough to ensure control. Every detail was deliberate. 2 glasses of water already on the table, a breeze light enough to lift napkins but not disrupt voices. 2 men at the far edge, his witnesses, I assumed, one in a blazer, the other with a discreet earpiece and a tablet he never looked away from. He was waiting before I arrived. I saw no warmth in his eyes, no cruelty either, just restraint, the kind that comes after grief hardens into policy. I sat down slowly, trying not to shake. "Thank you," I said. He didn't answer. I just nodded for me to speak. So I did. "I was stupid," I began, voice small. "I thought I was being clever, but I wasn't. I was showing off, trying to, I don't know, make people laugh, feel something I didn't think it would." "You didn't think," he said quietly. Tears hit fast. I hated how fast. I pressed the cloth napkin to my mouth, trying to hold shape. "I lost myself for a while. After my dad died, after the promotion fell through, I think I just disrespected the one person who still showed up," he said. I nodded, unable to speak. "I'm not here for an apology, Sasha," he said, resting his fingertips on a slim envelope beside his glass. "You asked for this meeting." So I agreed. I leaned forward. "I want to make this right." "No," he said evenly. "You want closure that still benefits you." I froze. He slid the envelope across the table, cream-colored, sealed with his legal firm's insignia, my name, typed neatly in the center. "What is it?" "Your last tether," he said. "A final waiver executed in accordance with the prenup, settlement terms, asset relinquishment, and confirmation of the clause you tried to dispute." I blinked. "That appeal was dismissed?" He nodded. "Weeks ago. You would have known if your counsel had any incentive to keep billing you." I opened the envelope. Inside, 3 pages. Simple language. No jargon. Just facts. The clause held. The house remained in his name. The accounts closed. The advisory foundation he now ran, legally fortified from any spousal claim, past or future. And at the bottom of the 3rd page, a single brutal line, "You are no longer recognized as having standing." I stared at it for a long time, not in anger, not in disbelief, but in final understanding. He didn't owe me words anymore, or warmth, or war. He owed me nothing. I looked up. He was already standing. The witnesses followed him. One picked up the extra glass. The other handed me a copy of the signed form in a plain folder and tipped his head politely. He didn't say goodbye, didn't even say my name. He simply walked down the steps toward the dock, the wind catching the edge of his coat, the sea reflecting a man already moving further away. I sat there a while longer, staring at the envelope. Not just a legal document, a verdict, one I'd written myself, 2 years ago with a smile and a glass of wine. It started with a headline someone texted me at 6:17 a.m. The man who quietly withdrew, GQ profile, clean layout, neutral tones, a cover image of a closed wooden gate at sunrise, private, precise, untraceable. They never used his name, but the details were unmistakable. A strategist known for building exit frameworks for high net worth clients. A former executive who disappeared after a public incident involving his wife and a colleague. A man who didn't retaliate, just removed himself. They quoted him once. "Humiliation doesn't need revenge. It needs distance, silence, and better architecture." That line detonated online. It spread in screenshots, on Reddit threads, podcast intros, Twitter bios. Someone tattooed it down their forearm and posted the photo. Others turned it into phone wallpapers. Better architecture became shorthand for leaving without looking back. They didn't have to say his name. Everyone who'd been at that rooftop party remembered. Everyone who knew me did the math. At first, I tried to lean into it. Posted a soft-lit selfie with the caption, "Sometimes you have to lose to find yourself." Healing is messy, but I'm learning. It didn't go how I thought. The first comment, "Didn't you get roasted at that rooftop party?" Then another, "She's the one from the consulting toast, right?" And then, "Girl, sit down. He built a whole escape plan and you still trying to go viral." I deleted the photo, reposted a quote about resilience. That flopped too. I turned off replies, but it didn't stop the screenshots. The speculation, the way people kept resharing the GQ quote with captions like, "The blueprint," or "This is how you vanish with style." A few posted side-by-side images of him at the Gala years ago, one of the only photos of us ever made public, next to that blurred balcony shot in Valencia, always with that same word, elevated. I thought I could manage the narrative, spin it into something redemptive, human, universal, but the truth is, I wasn't in the story anymore. He didn't mention me, not once, not directly, not vaguely, not even as a cautionary tale. That was the worst part. It would have been easier if he'd dragged me, named me, taken me apart. At least then I'd exist in the memory of the moment. Instead, he gave the world nothing but structure, distance, precision, and they adored him for it. I tried to pitch a podcast interview, reclaim the story, tell my side. They passed. No interest in revisiting the past, the producer wrote. The story's already been told, and it wasn't yours. I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. The story wasn't mine. It had never been. I was the opening scene, the bad setup to his better architecture. A lesson, not a legacy. And now, no matter what I posted, wrote, shared, or liked, people remembered one thing. I was the woman at that rooftop party, and he was the man who vanished and took the spotlight with him. It was dusk when I arrived. The estate sat behind high cypress walls, warm lights glowing through the trees, laughter drifting gently over the hedges. I recognized a few voices. The kind of voices that used to include me, the kind that now lived behind locked gates and unlisted addresses. I didn't get an invitation. I found out through a tag, quickly deleted, on someone's private story. A fundraiser. Quiet. Exclusive. My ex-husband's name wasn't on the flyer, but it didn't need to be. The design language, the location, the understated elegance all bore his fingerprints, his circles, his world. I hadn't seen him since Valencia. I hadn't heard from him since that envelope, but some part of me, reckless, desperate, unresolved, needed to try one last time. The guard at the gate looked confused when I stepped out of the rideshare. Name? I gave it. He checked a list, shook his head. I'm not on it, I said. But if you just let him know I'm here, he'll want to, He raised a hand, spoke into the mic clipped to his collar, waited. Then, he's coming. My stomach twisted. I caught my reflection in the glass of the security booth, shoulders too stiff, lipstick too bright, eyes too loud. And then he was there, walking calmly from the courtyard, black jacket, no tie, composed as always. I hadn't seen him in over a year, and yet nothing in his expression suggested any hesitation, no flicker, no residual heat, just stillness. He stopped just behind the gate. I stepped forward, instinct rising. I just want to talk. He nodded once like he'd been prepared for this possibility, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small card. Plain white, no logo. He passed it through the slot in the gate. I took it with trembling fingers. One line. You spoke when you should have stood beside me. My mouth opened, but no sound came. He looked at me for exactly 1 second longer, then turned and walked away. No pause, no second glance. The gate buzzed softly, and I heard it lock. Behind it, the music resumed, strings and low jazz and the sound of voices that used to greet mine with warmth. I stood there as the night pulled its coat over the world, holding that card like it might change into something else if I stared hard enough. But it didn't, and for the first time, I understood something I'd refused to see for years. He wasn't angry, he wasn't punishing me, he had simply removed me from the conversation, from the room, from the story. The silence I'd once used like a weapon had become his armor, and now it was impenetrable. The driver was still waiting. I got back in. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Because the gate didn't close behind me. It had never opened.